Hello, everyone. It's Amy Armstrong here. Today, I'm sitting with Moneca Dunham. Monica's going to share her story about the RCP and about how she helped herself and her family in healing, and also then went on to become a root cause protocol consultant herself and help other people. So, hello, Moneca.
Hi, Amy. Thanks for having me, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to share.
Yeah, such a pleasure. And thank you for sitting down and sharing your story as well. So take us back prior to the RCP and tell us about what life was like. You have been telling me a little bit off the recording about your daughter and about the challenges, the health challenges you faced there. So yeah, share with us what that looked like for you.
Sure. So I was a nurse at the time, and my daughter started having health issues, which ended up being gastroparesis and extreme gastritis. And we weren't getting anywhere with conventional practitioners. So I read Nutrition and Physical Degeneration by Weston Price, and this would have been back in 2005. And that really resonated with me because my father grew up on a farm in Missouri and my mother in Quito, Ecuador, and they were raised on ancestral foods. And
Mm.
so as I was reading that book, I realized, oh my gosh, this is how my parents were brought up. But myself growing up in the 70s and 80s, I was brought up pretty much on processed food, um, almost completely. So I started back in 2005 converting our family over to that. And then with my daughter's health issues, the move to New York City, my husband losing project after project, just all that stress built up.
Mm.
And I ended up dealing with depression and anxiety. I was only sleeping about 30 minutes a night, went on conventional and antidepressant and anti-anxiety medication, benzodiazepine, just for a few months. And then fortunately, my daughter's naturopath said, let me do a urine test on you for neurotransmitter levels. She did that. And based on those results, ended up putting me on some supplements that were just B vitamins, minerals, and some herbs. And after a month on those, even though my daughter's situation hadn't changed, I felt myself again. And I was able to wean off the medications, stayed on those for about a year. So that was really my first encounter with the power of nutrition to balance neurotransmitter levels and get me out of my funk and feeling much better.
Yeah. Wow. And so I guess from there, how did you hear about the RCP and explore, the mineral aspect of your healing further?
Sure. So over a decade later, we stuck to ancestral diet and minerals, and actually we were on, I think, almost all the RCP supplements by that point, except for about four of them. Just found them and they resonated with me, even the same brands. And so at that point, I had been guiding people on their own health journeys, but I decided I wanted to use the HTMA because it was non invasive and it was cheap, but I needed to get training on how to read that. So Morley's was one of three programs that I was considering. And at the time, he was preaching to the choir with minerals and with ancestral diet, but I didn't know anything about copper and iron dysregulation. And I remember at the time thinking, oh, I've never been anemic. I'm really not interested in iron, but I knew I had to learn more about that to decide whether or not that was the right program. And so I was listening to one of his podcasts, and my daughter at the time was a young teen and was sitting there with me eating. And he started talking about how the United States and a few other countries in 1941 started to fortify their foods with iron filings. And I literally turned to my daughter and said, okay, this guy's a total nutter. This is not the program for me. And Morley knows about this. I told him about this story. But she said immediately, she said, don't you remember those experiments I did at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, where we put a little acid on the different cereals and used a magnet under the microscope to pull out the iron filings? Well,
Wow.
so my daughter was really used to guide me in that situation. And I realized that Morley wasn't a nutter, that he was onto truth that I had never heard. And so I took a deep dive and then ended up doing the training.
Yeah, wow. That's a fascinating experiment, and I get your daughter really helped you to see that this was the path to go down, didn't she? So tell us a little bit more. Let's delve a little bit more into your own health or into your daughter's, if you would like to share that. Tell us what sort of symptoms that you were suffering or she was suffering from, and what seemed to be helpful in your healing journey.
Well, for myself, as I continued on the ancestral diet, I stayed on those supplements that were just the B vitamins, herbs, and minerals for about a year. And then just the ancestral diet, it got my nutrition replete enough that I no longer needed those. And so after that, I was fine. And by the time I found the RCP, um, I really wasn't having any issues. My energy was great. I was sleeping well. And I really attribute that to the ancestral diet. Also, I was still cycling. And so that also helped with getting rid of the iron. But then Morley also taught me something that I didn't know during training. And that is that we had been taking a big 12-ounce glass of raw milk kefir and raw milk cheeses, and been putting 2 to 3 raw egg yolks in that kefir every day for years. And I was just doing it for nutrition because I knew
Mm,
all that was very bioavailable. But when I went through training, he talked about Dr. Moon's book on iron and explained that the raw milk and the raw cheeses would have had apolilactoferrin, which
yeah.
binds iron, and the raw egg yolks had ovoferrin that binds iron. And so I realized that just by doing that for nutrition, that had actually probably really helped me from accumulating more iron
Mm,
um, during my during that time. And that's probably why I was still having good energy and good sleep and feeling well. My daughter, she was doing great by the time I found the RCP. Everything was resolved. We ended up using our 22nd practitioner was an energetic practitioner of all things, NAET, but he didn't believe me. He checked her for every food allergy because he was convinced it was a food allergy. Um, and I finally got him to check different forms of mercury, and he checked those, and that was what went weak when he tested her. And so he began, it was months and a good amount of funds, which was totally worth it. But it took months and months to energetically remove the mercury. And then she was, doing
yeah.
so much better. And so just
Wow.
continued with the ancestral diet, and she's doing great.
Yeah. So can we explore the natural allergy treatment a little bit more? Because this might be, some people listening to this video, it might be their first time hearing about NAET. I know we refer to it a lot in the RCP as, you know, those intolerances and things that people suffer can be, and histamine reactions can be a real roadblock in their healing. And I know we talk a lot about EFT as well, but I haven't explored this with anyone, the NAET, to really explain what that is and how that actually worked for you. So if you tell us a bit about that.
Sure. So the practitioner that we went to, he was very energetically gifted. He's here in Colorado. He is an acupuncturist, and he used the acupuncture to augment the NAET treatments. So there's many wonderful things about what he did, but one was that my daughter was 3 at the time. So I got to act like a conduit. So she would literally sit in my lap, and she would hold the vial in her hands. So whether it was chicken or dairy or mercury, whatever it was, she would hold it. I would hold her hand, her other hand, and then he would muscle test me. So he didn't even have to touch her. So it wasn't a traumatic experience to
Mm,
her. He would muscle test me, and then I could actually take the needles for her. So he would stick the acupuncture needles in me to augment the treatment. And needles, being a nurse, needles don't bother me anyways, and these are tiny. So the beautiful thing about it was that it was not in any way traumatic to my daughter, which is good because we had months and months of
mm,
treatment to clear the mercury, the inorganic, and the thimerosal to the point where she was finally not having any issues at all. We got a little bit of improvement, but then just as with healing, you can go back and forth and have hills and valleys, and
Mm.
and that was what happened with that too. So I was very grateful that she didn't have to take the needles or go through any trauma for that.
Yeah, it's and my understanding is not all practitioners use acupuncture in conjunction with it, do they? It's more, I'm not sure what the tool is called that they actually use on you when they once they muscle test a vial. But yeah.
Well, some use acupressure. So we have another NAET that we use in Kansas City. She does everything long distance, but when we're there, she's not a licensed acupuncturist, so she'll use acupressure. Some will use something that goes on your back along your spine
Mm.
to reset it. Mine did not, but yeah, and I thought about going into that for a while. And even though I was so grateful and that made such a difference for my daughter night and day, it just didn't resonate with me. I really loved nutrition and I used to be focused on detoxification. So I didn't go into that. But the other thing that makes a difference is also just the practitioner themselves, because some are very gifted with energetics, as are the gentleman here in Colorado and
Mm.
one in Kansas City. And some are just not as gifted. And also the way they test for clearance, if they're checking for 100% clearance or not, that can also make a big difference. So the
Yeah.
NA practitioner, the one you get, if you don't have good results, try to go by word of mouth. Maybe ask friends or ask other people who they've had good results with, because that can make a huge difference.
Absolutely, yeah, and thank you for sharing your experience with that. I think that's really really will resonate with some people to take up that sort of treatment. And I know that Morley mentions it to his clients as well, sometimes when it seems appropriate. So I'll pop a little bit of information in the video. We may have a link on the website. I'll have to have a look and see, and I can put some information. NAET, what does that stand for?
It is Nambudripad's allergy elimination technique.
There
And
you
Dr.
go.
Nambudripad, who started it, Debbie, I believe she has her MD, her PhD, her ND, and the other two. She's just one of those people who loves to constantly learn and very intelligent, obviously, also.
Yeah, yeah, fascinating. So moving forward a little bit, you came into the RCP because you were really interested in the HTMA and you decided to do the course. You were in group 10, I believe.
Right, group
Yeah.
10.
So tell us about your experience at the Institute and doing the training to become the RCPC.
Well, first of all, I have to say Morley was right, because I'm a nurse, so I was conventionally trained, even though I had been deep into ancestral eating and natural practices for over a decade, about 15 years by the time I came to the RCP. And he was right in that he says that we have to unlearn. Even though I had unlearned a lot of my conventional training up to that point, I had so much more to unlearn during the RCP. So he was completely right. I loved the training. I loved all the research that he presented and the case studies. And what I'm really grateful for that he did, because like I said, we were already on almost all the RCP supplements with the exception of about 4, but I didn't know anything about copper and iron dysregulation. And
Mm.
so I really feel like Morley gave me that foundational piece of truth that I was missing, because I was already doing, like I said, the ancestral diet. I was grounding. I, had done cold therapy, so many of these things that you find in natural circles. But once he gave me, taught me about that, the copper iron dysregulation, and I started donating blood, which I hadn't done in about 20 years. I just finally had that foundational piece that I was looking for, which I thought had been, detoxification, and was focused on that for years. And then really, it took me a little while to believe more through the training. I did not just latch onto that and say, this is truth. But when he started talking about, detoxification and how it's not beneficial, and, really talked about how it strips all the minerals and, he's often talked about how detoxification doesn't know the difference between, I believe it's a rose bush and a boulder, because it will just pull everything.
Yeah.
It took me a while to embrace that, but then I finally did, and I'm very grateful for that. So I just learned a ton, and I'm still learning. I'm still unlearning, because that conventional training, it's deep. I did that back in, the mid 90s. So it's been a long time. I worked in the hospital for a long time, but very grateful that he gave me that last foundational piece. And then he encouraged us to look into biomagnetism, as he called it, I think, the perfect complement for the RCP, or a wonderful complement for the RCP. And took a couple years of me going, well, maybe, I don't know, and looking into it, and then finally got trained. So, so yeah, he's given me a lot of excellent guidance.
Yeah, wow. And I didn't know that about you. Tell us about the biomagnetism and how it does really complement the RCP. We're having a really juicy chat here. I think there's going to be elements that people may not have heard of before that really, round out the RCP and complement it and might suit them. So yeah, tell us about the biomagnetism.
Sure. So it must have been during training. Morley was talking about biomagnetism because his wife, Dr. Liz, who's a chiropractor, is also a biomagnetism therapist. And that just got me interested. There was something, I think, just like with the ancestral diet, how that very much resonated with me, knowing my parents' histories. There was something about the biomagnetism that also, even from the first time he mentioned it, resonated with me, because I knew it was completely non-invasive. And so that got me interested. And what I have found with the clients I've treated, some who are also root cause protocol clients here in Colorado, is that they were making progress on the root cause protocol, the two I'm thinking about in particular, and they had improvements. But as you know, it takes a while to rebuild your nutritional stores, whether you're talking about your retinol stores in your liver or your minerals, it takes a while. And so although when people start the root cause protocol, hopefully they see some improvements, it takes years. If we're 30, 40, 50, and we've been living decades of conventional food and a stressed out life and yada, yada, it takes quite a while to rebuild those and to really get all the benefits you're hoping for. And what the biomagnetism did for my clients who are also on the RCP was it took care of their symptoms. Not all of them, but it took care of some of the symptoms that they were still having even on the RCP. Like one of my clients, she was supposed to have surgery for a hiatal hernia, and she had enough improvements that she was able to put that off. Her allergies completely. She came to me one time and she said, okay, I'm really freaked out by this. She said, my allergies are horrible every spring, and so are my son's. And he was about 20. And she said, my son's allergies are still horrible right now because it's allergy season. She said, I don't have any allergies at all, and I'm really freaked out by this, because she was probably in her around 50. And so she had dealt with this for decades.
Yeah.
So that's the beautiful thing about it, is it doesn't interrupt the RCP in any way, but it can bring improvements to symptoms that would take a lot longer. And then the thing that I really love about, excuse me, biomagnetism is it's completely guided by the client's body, because sometimes I'll scan for all the pairs, and the first time certain ones will go out, because that is the priority that the body has for healing. So I'm just checking to see, how their body reacts, if it's a pair that needs to be treated or not. And then the second time, sometimes pairs will come up that didn't come up the first time, because now the body is ready. The body's priority at that point to have those pairs treated. And so that's the beauty to me about biomagnetism is it's completely guided by the client's body and by their body's priorities.
Yeah, wow, that's really fascinating, and it's definitely on my list of things to try and to study more as well. Yeah, I find that anything that complements what you're already doing, and that, like you say, can help people with their symptoms, and healing is a wonderful tool. So thank you for sharing about that. So you did the RCPC training. You became a root cause protocol consultant. How has that? How have you integrated that into your, into your professional life? What are you doing with the RCP now?
I'm doing consultations, so just doing Zoom consultations with clients, adults, and kids, and I really enjoy, getting to meet people from all over, not just Colorado, but all over the states. And my passion has always been to help to empower people by teaching them what their body is communicating with them and teaching them to respect that instead of pushing past that and stressing the body. And so that's really probably my number one passion with the RCP, is just because for so many of us, when we turn to conventional medicine, we just go to a doctor and we want a pill or a procedure, a surgery, whatever, to take care of the symptoms. And we have never been taught to listen to our body, to try to figure out what is my body communicating to me when it does this. What is it saying to me? And I find that I do have some clients that come in who are, already, they know about that. They know how to listen to their body and respect it, but most don't. And so I just love being able to help them decipher what their body is communicating and to take everything at a speed and that, works for their body at that moment in time, because we're all dynamic. And so what works now may not work in 3 months, and so we've really got to listen to our bodies and how our bodies are guiding us. And I think that gives clients, it empowers them, but it also gives them confidence that they don't have to go to conventional medicine for everything. They don't have to trust in that if they want to instead take the time and effort to listen to their bodies.
Yeah, it's a different model of healthcare, isn't it? Where we're really partnering with people to, walk alongside them and on this journey and educate them at the same time about, what their body is telling them and helping them in that way, rather than just telling them, take this, do this, come back and see me in a month or 2 months. It's really a different approach, and it works. Yeah. So I guess my final question for you, Moneca, is really just to, in a couple of sentences, to sum up how the RCP has changed your life.
I think the biggest thing is that it gave me the foundational truth that I needed for all the other things to work optimally that I had found on my own in years before. It was that final piece, that foundational piece that I needed, that I was missing.
Missing piece of the jigsaw puzzle.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the base piece that I so desperately needed so that everything else would work optimally.
Yeah. So that copper iron dysregulation is really key information, isn't it?
It is. It is. You can get benefits from the rest, but for everything really to work well and, to see that oxidative stress and inflammation come down. My husband had tremendous benefits once we, started the blood donations, and then we had to switch a couple things, had to switch back to the Pure Synergy vitamin C that we had been on before, but we're taking Whole Foods vitamin C with ascorbic acid, and had to switch back to the Rosita because we were doing fermented cod liver oil at the time. So making those changes and then starting the blood transfusions made huge improvements for my husband, who was very iron overloaded. So
the blood donations, do you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You said transfusions, just for people watching the videos, just to not get confused.
Blood donations. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Moneca. It's been such a pleasure talking to you and learning a bit more about the biomagnetism and about the NAET as a treatment, and to really supplement what we're doing with the RCP. I'm going to pop some information in the video notes about those things, along with your contact details. So if people want to reach out to you, they can do that. So thank you again.
Thank you.